The administration's noncompliance with the judge's order in conducting deportations under the Alien Enemies Act after a judge had said that those deportations could not proceed does pose a serious threat to our system of checks and balances, to rule of law in the United States. It is part of a troubling pattern, however, of noncompliance with district court orders or trial court orders. I think the real test is whether we see continued noncompliance. And I know that ACLU, which is representing the plaintiffs and trying to prevent the use of the Alien Enemies Act outside the scope of its text, that they are raising the noncompliance with the court today.
It doesn't matter in these cases whether the planes were over international waters or not. The defendants, President Trump, the Secretary of Homeland Security, those folks were all within DC and so subject to federal jurisdiction. The larger issue is the Trump administration seems invested in making this a fight. And that really does raise this huge question of what happens if the executive branch can get away with defying court orders. I don't think, non-compliance with one order in one case is necessarily the end of the rule of law. But the question is, what is to compel the government to comply in future cases? Because in a world in which the government can pick and choose which court orders it wants to comply with, the law is going to mean whatever the president says, not whatever the courts say.
This is a time of war because Biden allowed millions of people, many of them criminals, many of them at the highest level. They emptied jails out. Other nations emptied their jails into the United States. That's an invasion. And these are criminals, many, many criminals, murderers, drug dealers at the highest level, drug lords, people from mental institutions. That's an invasion.
The reason that the president is invoking the Alien Enemies Act is to bypass those due process protections that exist in immigration law. This wartime authority has never been interpreted to include due process protections for individuals who are the citizens or natives of a country with which we're at war. And so even if a person is not actually a member of Tren de Aragua, just the government is accusing them of that without evidence, Trump is hoping that that will be enough for him to put people into detention and then deport them out of the country. So deporting people who we actually don't know what they've done, deporting people who very well may be innocent. And then I think the other thing that's worth noting here is that the Alien Enemies Act proclamation issued by the president includes people who are lawfully present in the United States, whether they're visa holders, individuals under TPS programs, or alternatively, individuals with credible, valid asylum claims who are here lawfully.
Some of the behind the scenes on how carried out some of the deportation, the flight.
The president did the right thing. I stand by it. I thought we removed in one day over 200 dangerous people, including MS-13. It was the right thing to do. And I see the video that President Bukele put out. It's a beautiful thing. These people are going to be held accountable.
You might think, we might all think, that a lot of these folks are bad people who shouldn't be in the United States, but they're entitled to a legal process to make sure, one, that they are who the government says they are, two, that the government has the authority it's claiming that it has, and three, that we're not sending them into conditions where they credibly fear torture or other forms of cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. So part of why I think we're seeing so much litigation activity is because it's pretty hard to unring the bell. Once individuals are removed from the United States, once they're handed off to other countries, that's probably the point at which the ability of federal courts to compel the return of those individuals stops. It's part of why we're seeing efforts to actually block the removals before they happen. Up to that point, though, I think it's well established that the federal courts have the power to halt the removal from the United States of citizens, non-citizens, criminals, non-criminals, whomever, until providing the process that's required by statutes and by the Constitution. So the remedies we're talking about here are the remedies we're seeing, which is temporary restraining orders, preliminary injunctions, maybe even writs of habeas corpus to ensure that the government can't just point at someone, accuse them of something, and use it as the basis for summarily removing them from the United States.
I don't want to downplay the tremendous seriousness, gravity of what our constitutional system not having appropriate checks and balances would look like. And what we saw the last time that the Alien Enemies Act was invoked was it was used to intern 31,000 non-citizens of Japanese, German, and Italian descent based on their ancestry, not actually based on their conduct or any dangerousness that could have been shown through due process. And that was during a real war. That was from a president who was actually trying to keep the country safe in World War II. We all agree, I think, that internment was shameful and that it should not be repeated. Now imagine this same tool that was responsible for 31,000 people being interned without due process, being turned against immigrants who are here lawfully, who may be here unlawfully, simply based on where they were born. It's un-American, and I hope that the courts will find it illegal.